First of all, I would like to say welcome to all our guests in the conference hall and also having access through online. So our panel is on Ankara process. It is about Turkey's facilitator role between Somalia and Ethiopia. These reunions are actually the second at their second phase, and the 17th September will be the third round for these discussions. Of course, the parties' explanations, of course, are known, and we will be elaborating them together with our guests here. First of all, I would like to make a little introduction with regards to the importance of the matter. How was it possible that Turkey actually became a facilitator? This is a question that needs to be addressed, I guess. This issue, I would like to touch base with regards to the principal reasons of the problem between Somalia and Ethiopia, and I would like to evoke the historical background of this matter. We will try to explain them first. So, this panel, principal resort problematic of this panel is this dispute between Somalia and Ethiopia and its main reasons. And the second point is Turkey's difficulties with regards to this matter, resolving this matter, and how these problems can be resolved. So this issue is not only about difficulties. When we say difficulties, it is not about difficulties between the Somalia and Ethiopia dispute, but also there are regional difficulties and the disinformation issues that's going on in the media with regards to the matter. So in this framework, Mr. Altinur Dahir, he's here with us today. He is the director of Teleford. It's a consulting company with regards to political issues, economic issues, and he is graduated from International Relations of Sakarya University in Turkey, and his master's degree is in Oxford University, and he has completed his master's, and he also was the president of a Turkish office of So Investment, and he is also a Turkish citizen. So his presence in this panel, this is the reason why I wanted him actually to take part in this panel. So we would like to investigate the matters with him here, and I would like him to explain a little bit the background of this issue. Our second speaker is Mr. Yunus Turhan. He is a president of Civilizations of Mediterranean Basin and Africa Application and Research Center of Ankara Hacı Bayram Veli University, and he's also a professor at this university. And he's also going to be working in the Harvard University African Studies program. He's going to be working there as well. Of course, the speakers are somehow linked one another. Altinur Dahir will be presenting the first part, and the second problematic will be dealt by Mr. Turhan. And so Mr. Turhan's responsibility here will be, of course, the difficulties that Turkey is faced, and also the regional global interactions. And the third issue will be about misinformation matters related to the dispute. And Tufan Aktaş will be explaining us this aspect of the matter. He is a former Anatolian Agency Ethiopian correspondent, and he is also a chief editor. So these issues, especially how it is reflected onto the media, what I mean by media reflection, not only some concentration perspectives on Turkey's facilitator role, but also Turkey's strategies fight against disinformation. So he will be he will be explaining us on these matters. First of all, I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Abdinur Dahir, especially with regards to the historical background, the uncertainty of the borders and historical origins of Somali ethical border disputes is going to be explained by him. Of course, the independence of Somalia from England and Ethiopia is the only country that's not been colonized, and Ethiopia also is a center of diplomacy in Africa. The diplomacy center of Africa is in this country. So Somalia and Ethiopia, these two actors, and the dispute that's ongoing between them has an important historical background. There are some uncertainty of borders and dispute of borders, and in the 90s in Somalia there's been a civil war, and there's been an interaction with Ethiopia, and in the recent years there is some initiatives with regards to settling peace between the two parties, and also this Ankara process is ongoing. So can you explain the turning points from starting from historical background up to today? Can you hear me? Mr. Khan, thank you very much for your invitation, and to the ORSAM team. Of course, talking about this issue will need a lot of timing, but I have a 15-20 minutes of time which is consecrated to me. So, and then after we will also have questions and answers session. Maybe we'll have more time to tackle the issues there as well. So in order to understand the dispute between Somalia and Ethiopia, we should touch base with the issues, how the relationship are shaped, and three factors. We have to understand three factors that has an influence on these relations. As Mr. Khan also said, there's a background, historical background, and there are turning points of the modern era, and also some recent developments that's been ongoing. When we look at the historical background, there are three periods that we can count. This is, first of all, the European countries before they invaded Africa, how the region was. In those era, there were disputes. And there were disputes just as it's been ongoing today, but the dispute was about beliefs. Ethiopians were Christians and Somalians were Muslims. And so the dispute was basically on belief matters. So Ethiopia was as a large point of the Christian community. During the colonization period, there's been disputes, and this actually was increasing at that time, and in the 19th century, actually, these contributed to the division of Ethiopia and Somalia. In 1982, there's been a Berlin's Africa conference, and all the European countries got together, and they actually wanted to divide Africa. Great Britain, Italy, France. So at that time, there has been a letter sent by Ethiopia's king to Queen Victoria of England, and it said if important states, if they come to Africa, Ethiopia will not be receiving them quietly. So then the Somalia invasion started, and regions. So this is actually the division that happened, and this actually contributed to the division of the region in the 19th century. In 1897, Great Britain made an Anglo-English treaty with Ethiopia and actually acquired the territories. And at that time, the aim was to have access to the sea, not to acquire land, because European countries, Eritrea was important. Eritrea was actually colonized by Italy, Djibouti by France, Somalia, Italia, and Great Britain. So Ethiopia has always been analyzed in the framework of having access to the sea. And latest, in 1945, in Manchester, there's been a conference, and in that conference, all English colonized African countries' representatives were there: Kenya, Sudan, Ghana. They wanted to acquire independence, and Haile Selassie, who actually participated to that conference, said, "Why we are here, our country is not invaded, but we wanted to have access to the sea, so that's the why we are here." In 1945, at the Conference of Manchester. In 1920s, there is another incentive to have access to sea. In 1920s, the controlled region of Ethiopia, for this area, actually, there's been a proposal by England. We will give Ogadenyo region to you. You can have, and you can make a corridor for us to reach the sea, like a port. Somaliland today of Somalia, this was actually a part of Somaliland. So this was actually an incentive in that regard to have access to this. And in the 1950s, Ethiopia wanted to make a federation with Eritrea to have access to the sea, and acquired Assab port. And Eritrea and Ethiopia had a dispute, and in 1993, when Eritrea acquired independence, Ethiopia today has its own port and is the largest country in Africa population-wise. So this dispute actually starts back from 1880, and this access to sea is a problem that has its roots in history. So When we look at the modern era and the turning points of the modern era, in 1984, there's been a crisis between Somalia and Ethiopia. There are 54 countries in Africa. When we look at it from international relations perspective, formation of states, there are two different countries in Africa. Ethiopia, there is therefore other African countries. The European drawn borders are all accepted by other African countries, but Ethiopia actually drew its own borders. And second of all is Somalia, how it is founded. It is instituted on the basis of ethnic nationalist approach. So actually there was an initiative to create a state in Somalia, saying that we should bring all African nationals together and create a Somalia. So this is actually the difference. In 1977, there's been a huge crisis between Ethiopia and Somalia, and it's one of the greatest wars in Africa. And after that, both Somalia and Ethiopia, there's been a civil war. All the governments in two countries were actually collapsed. But later on, from 91 to 2000, end of 2000, there's been some weapon support and so on that's been received. And in 2007 in Somalia, Ethiopia army invaded Somalia. It's been actually an initiative, and those Shebabs and everything that actually emerged in the region actually has its roots from this event. I was there actually at the time, so I actually was able to detect how Shebab emerged. And Somalia had a unitary system previously and became a federal state with the influence of Ethiopia. There's a white paper that's been written. A new initiative, a new proposal was given so that the state can become a new state. But of course this is a very weak initiative, and Ethiopia got in contact all the time with this federal state. In 2008, it's been a turning point in Ethiopia. Abiy Ahmed regime was actually settled. It was a regional integration initiative, and Ethiopian head of federations settled a new relationship. In 2020 and 21, Somalia supported actually Ethiopia government and gave support, and they were about to invade Addis Ababa even. Now Ethiopia is again starting a sea access. There's two conditions. One, to reinforce its economic situation. After the 2000s, Ethiopia was saying let's make a regional integration, let's have access to the sea, and let's put on some initiatives. These infrastructure projects, let's carry them. Let's carry on with the cooperatives. So there is this conflict also at the background in Sudan, so there is no stability in the region at the same time. But the country is still willing to have access to the sea, and it's going to happen. But there is my idea on this, personal idea, is this will lead actually this to a civil war. This can lead to a civil war because there's this competition between the two countries, having its roots back in the history, and also from the public point of view. So diplomatic initiatives are needed. What can be the resolutions? We can, of course, discuss this later on. So this is basically what I would like to say. I would like to elaborate also this issue because you also have a couple of minutes more. In Marmajo era, can we elaborate that a little further? Ethiopia's access to the sea through Somalia. It's actually, this issue was raised at the time. What will this have as an impact on the Ankara process? What do you think? In Farmajo era's agreement and its results, can you say something about that as well? In 2019, if I'm not wrong, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to Mogadishu and had actually talked about an initiative with the president of Somalia. How can we reach to the sea, access to the sea? And that's actually the focus there. Yes, we would like that, of course. There are different ports. These ports are not used at the moment. And Ethiopia says, let's open them commercially. So this was a framework that was discussed with, at that time, this wasn't an agreement, but this was actually a talk. When we say ports, there are different ports in Somalia. And there's also this Al-Shabaab threat. So at the same time, there are some difficulties geographically with regards to how to constitute roads or enlarge the existing roads. When we look at it from this perspective, which port will be the most rational as a preference? That agreement that you were referring, 4 ports were discussed at that time. Let's invest in 4 ports and make roads up to Ethiopia. Ethiopia is not only Addis Ababa, it's a huge country, and when you look at it from this perspective, there's Djibouti, it's more close to Berbera, and in the south there's Mogadishu, and it's even closer to that. So Ethiopia is not only the capital, constituted of the capital city. There are different federations, and some of them are close to Mogadishu. So it's more close to Berbera because it has relations with Mogadishu, and there's a road up to Ethiopia, but it's not enough. There should be 2 more highways. Let's say if Berbera makes export and export, it's close to export and import matters, but Ethiopia has, in its highlander regions, there's also a lot of livestock commerce is ongoing. It's impossible to bring them to Berbera, so you can send it to the south. It will be easy. So as Somalia, we would like to open our ports, and it's actually a beneficial thing for Ethiopia. 130 million, it will be 140 million next year. So this market, it is good actually to serve to this market. It will be beneficial. Thank you very much. So we have also discussed about this Farmajo areas talks, and we have touched at this issue as well. Of course, Ethiopia does not have access to sea, but interestingly, has a naval army trained by French army, and here there are some regional and global interactions going on. For instance, United States, Israel, and United Arab Emirates actually constitutes a party. A pole in that sense. And Turkey, with regards to African Horn and its approach to Africa, what would you say about if the Turkey's is a third point of view in this sense, or is that an overlap? Turkish policy is an overlap between the poles. So actually, I would like you to explain us that a little bit. And also for the Ankara process, just as mentioned at the beginning of my speech, the dispute ongoing and its resolution, there is some difficulties, and one of those difficulties is this regional and global interactions, and also there are important opportunities linked to the process, especially for the regional stability. These two actors, when they make peace, so when we say that the Ankara process has come up with a positive solution, there will be an opportunity, positive opportunity for development, but of course the problems should be overcome. So with this background, I would like to ask to Yunus Turhan, how did the Ankara process start, and what were the main motivations? What will be their contribution, its contribution to the developments in the region, and in the case of a positive scenario as an outcome, how to also open the gateway to a peace, and how to complete the process with peace. How can we actually overcome the difficulties in this process? So how Turkey is situated in all this. Thank you. Welcome to all of you. As Mr. Abdunur Dahir left, I would like to take it from where he left. He talked about the historical background. I actually brought a book with me. So if you would like to read more about the historical background, this is a book that I would like to recommend. So the wish for Ethiopia to have access to the sea is quite similar to, as I think of the Russians' willingness to have access to the sea. So Ethiopia actually has actually having access to the sea is some kind of existence objective of Ethiopia. So always this having access to the sea was there, and it's going to continue. Between 69 and 2000, the Eritrea port was served as an advantage from economic point of view and military point of view. But after Eritrea acquired its independence, now Ethiopia's possibility to have access is through Djibouti. So 80% of actually the activities ongoing between the two countries are through the port. So Djibouti, 75–80% of the income is based on this trade. So Ethiopia is actually willing to have access to the sea in order to break this dependence. Let's look at the actors. There's Somalia. Turkey-Somalia relationships. I don't want to explain its historical background, but our president's visit to Somalia started, and after military support was settled. So this is actually a hybrid strategy. There's humanitarian aid and also some defense and economic contributions from Turkey's side. So Somalia policy of Turkey is actually Turkey is actually putting into effect a policy of Somalia, putting everything in the same basket for Somalia. And this actually, Turkey has a private relationship with Somalia today. When we look at Ethiopia, historically deeply rooted with Turkey, there's this Ankara visit, 125th relationship commemoration. It had relations at the time of the Republic, first years of the Republic, at the time of Atatürk. Ethiopia actually, there is the consulate in Addis Ababa. There is 150 companies, $2.5 billion of trade volume. Turkey is the second country that's investing in the country after China. Of course, we cannot know for sure the real volume right now, but it's been a little bit decreasing. But when we look at it in Africa, Turkey's-Ethiopia relationship is very important. When we look at Somalia, Turkey, 462 billion. So actually there is no comparison here. There's a difference with regards to the actors as well. Turkey, in the sense, understands motivations and desires of Ethiopia, and also understands the motivation and its willingness to have respect to its sovereignty and its national borders, political independence. Somalia there is ongoing, it's a very fragile issue, and therefore Turkey understands this fragility, and Turkey's relationships between these two countries are there. There are some agreements. In 2021, there's been a framework agreement with Ethiopia, military and economic-wise. This proposal for negotiation came from Ethiopia, and they said, you have relations with the two actors, bring us together and make peace between us. Abiy Ahmed, the political scientist and international relations expert, know is that he is the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. When he became Prime Minister, I looked at what he did, his activities during 100 first days of his Prime Minister duty. He actually let go of the political criminals and everything. So there's been actually a reform that he's undertaken. He actually abolished all the restrictions in the country. He made his first visit to Sisi, to Egypt. They have a competition historically between with Egypt, but he says leave the competition in the history. And this is important for the regional development. For after the 100th day of his duty, he received the Nobel Prize. It's an important step. But Ethiopia, actually, when we look at the crisis in Ethiopia, the things changed. And this is an important aspect for Somalia as well. This became problematic, kind of a threat for Somalia concerning security. So Ethiopia's, during its last years, their aggressive comportments actually has an effect regionally. So in July 1st, these talks started in Türkiye, and the second round was in August, and the 13th of August was the third, and on the 17th September there will be the fourth talks. When we look at the body language, we can see that the parties are very tense. They come to Ankara, they do not see each other. It shows us that there is a tension between the two parties. There is the shots of diplomacy going on. They don't want to see each other. And Somalia representatives are very angry, and they say they are not so sincere with regards to the Ethiopian representatives. They do not show sincerity. Ethiopia says, no, we would like to complete this process successfully because this crisis constitutes does not serve to our regional policies. For the Berbera port matter, 1st of January 2024, there's been an agreement done between Somaliland. The Somaliland, which is a federal entity, makes an agreement. So this is actually juridically not possible. And for this 50 years usage of this Berbera port, and Somaliland has been stayed only for 5 days, and it's been recognized by a lot of countries. Maybe they are so excited about that and they want to continue their aim to continue. So in 2024, it's a new process that started from Turkey's perspective. In 2016, there was this development. Port Dubai World, this is a company, came to the Berbera port, and $442 billion of investments was made by this company. So there's no crisis at the time between the two countries. And in 2018, Ethiopia came on the stage and became part of the project of the agreement. So this actually was not reflected much on the media, but some shares of the port acquired by Dubai, 19% by Ethiopia, 31% by Somalia. So I think the problem was starting back in 2016. So Ethiopia came after that and made an agreement with Somaliland, which has no foundation. So, of course, there are frozen crises. Of course, Ethiopia, it's important for Ethiopia to reach access. 44 countries in the world do not have access to sea. Ethiopia is the great actor here. The other 43 countries do not have this kind of sensitivity for sea access. Turkey understands this. We understand that you have this desire, but there are some official channels and there is a judicial framework, and let's do it this way. So Turkey's approach was this, and this is a facilitating role from Turkish side. So let me wrap up. I've talked about Ethiopia, Somalia, and also I would like to discuss Egypt. Lately, with regards to the Western media and the Gulf media, they talk about Turkey, Ethiopia, and Somalia. It is about a hegemony competition between the two countries on the Red Sea. So Ethiopia wants to actually break the hegemony of Egypt on Red Sea. It is actually quite important. So I think with regards to this Red Sea axis, Ethiopia challenging this hegemony of Egypt. In Turkey's perspective, after Turkey's initiative, this was not actually reflected on the media, but two parties made a deal. Egypt is going to send 5,000 soldiers to Somalia, and Sisi will visit Turkey, and so on. So this actually pushes Egypt to take a position against Turkey. Sudan, Egypt's military presence in Sudan, when it's weakened, this was the scenario to render an equilibrium in that sense. Egypt sees Turkey as an balancing power to balance actually Ethiopia's policies and facilitator. So Turkey's, as a result of this picture, Turkey invested on Somalia and has an importance for Somalia. This is not the sole argument. Egypt also has some way on regional perspectives. We can see as a result Turkey would be able to provide a solution to this. Sometimes some experts say Turkey's efforts are in vain, there's no going to be solution, but at least Turkey wants to put together the parties on the basis of principle rules and perspectives. There's been an agreement in Kenya. In Abiy Ahmed, I've mentioned about that. This is the book, it's his book. It is important to understand the policy of Turkish policy. I will not give much detail on that, but I recommend it. So it is interesting. Abiy Ahmed thinks that all these African matters, thinks that these problems should be resolved by Africans through African policies. So does not accept Turkish facilitation, and went to Pretoria and included there the United States. Why he did that, I don't know, but so with regards to solutions, he thinks that the solutions should come from African countries, but now it's a Turkish solution that's requested. So this is a question I leave it to you. Of course, this is a long process. This is not something that will happen overnight. There is a trust issue historically, and I think that Turkey's foreign policy with peace intentions can be used, but it will take time. But I think that it will achieve to a positive result. So if you have any questions, of course, at these questions and answers, we can discuss them. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, you have actually touched the issue. We have to actually emphasize this, underline this. China is an economic actor with regards to African Horn, and Russia also has a security presence, especially during the recent years. Turkey's, with both of them, of course, Turkey is a NATO country. On the other hand, also with the Eastern actors like Russia, has a distinction because Turkey has an authoritarian regime according to them, with the Peking Convention they've mentioned. My idea on that is that Turkey is like a third way actor, emerged as a third way actor here. And also with regards to difficulties for this process, we will continue talking about them. Here, when I first started my speech, there's also the reflections of media and also disinformation, fight against disinformation. What do you think, Mr. Tufan, how this issue is reflected on Ethiopia, in Djibouti, Kenya, in Turkish media, in Western media, how these issues are reflected? And with regards to the continuation of this process, what kind of an approach can we see on the media? For instance, last week, a few days ago, Hassan Sheikh, the president of Somalia, gave a speech saying that the Ankara process came to an end, and this was a discourse that's been ongoing. But the explanation was nothing like that. So this actually shows that, as Mr. Yunus already stated during his speech, Ethiopia, as per the Memorandum of Entente, uses this memorandum, and Mali also uses the relation with Egypt, because Sheikh Mahmoud also visited Egypt. So Egypt is being used as leverage against. So both of the parties would like to come to a solution, to an entente. But as Abdunur also mentioned, Somalia says, I will open my ports to you, but only for commercial purposes. But the agreement between Ethiopia and Somaliland, we don't know the inside of it, because it's not been part of the media. We don't know about the content. We have some hints. Mr. Yunus also mentioned in 2016, this is very important, in DP World's situation, and also Ethiopia's participation to that partnership to that. So what I would like to ask you principally is, how are the narratives in media with regards to, is there any sort of disinformation, and are there any strategies to fight those disinformation? I would like to get back to the historical background, because there are some issues that are lacking. At the Ottoman Empire time, because it sheds light to today, and why Turkey is needed as an actor actually has a root in that. Red Sea is dominated by the Ottoman back then. Sevaki ports were dominated by the Ottoman. So Ethiopia's approach that's changed towards Turkey is actually interesting, because there is the competition historically. Ethiopia's access to sea is one of the main important desires, and it's been in the 19th century. There has been a second Theodros requested directly help from the England Queen, and in the letter it said, let us help get rid of the Turks from the borders, from the ports. We don't want them on the coast. When they say Turks, there are Egyptians and some commanders, a few commanders that went from the Ottoman to the territory. So England's relationship with Ottomans at the time required that England did not give a response to that letter, and months after that, England had to intervene to Ethiopia and sent troops, and the government collapsed. We do not talk about an English invasion to Ethiopia, because it directly retrieved from that. But the head of state actually suicided because it didn't win the war against England. Everything, actually the starting point was that letter, and the first thing that's written in that letter was to get rid of the Turks on the coasts, because the hegemony of the Ottoman was there in the Red Sea, and that was the rhetoric actually developed by the coast countries. And all the emperors that had a domination on ethnical groups in Africa had this in mind, that are dominating the Red Sea. So when this course, this rhetoric that's been told to the public, one of the actually motivations for this entente actually was to become brothers and to have access to the port. We didn't talk about this, but about this agreement about Somaliland. Before, Abiy Ahmed actually explained that and said some of the shares of the port will be given to Eritrea and to retrieve a port in exchange. But we have to say that Ethiopia tried something before. It had nothing that it can do to Djibouti, because there's a lot of military bases there. There's nothing that it can do. It's already is used and has no possibility to send a naval troop to there. Had tried Eritrea, a part of it, but was not successful. And in 2016, as Mr. Yunus said, Somalia government reacted severely to that, and that is the reason why Ethiopia started a third initiative, as looking for a third way And now, after the agreement for the Somaliland, now the process arrived to the Ankara process, up to Ankara process. And the closure of the door to Eritrea, it shows that the country is aware that it cannot do a contribution. We, the correspondent, when there is a problem with our neighbors, for instance, a dispute and so on, when we're writing the news, we always take into consideration the following: the relationship historically. If it's very positive between the two countries and there is a dispute, you try to not to reinforce that negative event that's on, because there are some brotherhood going on, military relations and communitarian relationships and so on. But if between the two countries involved there is a war that happened, and there is a dispute after that, you try to actually exacerbate that news. We can see the same for all the media narratives today. Some parts, they don't see Somalia as Somaliland as a different separate state, and the rest, when you look at it in the judiciary, and when you go there and you ask what you think about Ethiopia today, I do not want to blame them, but Ethiopian army would have somehow damaged a member of their families. So when they look at Ethiopia, they don't see the country as a brother country. And Ethiopia, when look at Somalia, they don't see them as their equivalent. So Ankara process, these negotiation talks ongoing here in Ankara, during the Ankara process, is we have to consider this: two parties do not see themselves the same or equals, and when they put these two sides, parties together on in the same table, we have to keep these aspects in consideration. Ethiopia has to see the Somalia as an equal, and Somalia needs to see Ethiopia as having goodwill, and that it will retrieve troops because the troops are also trained by Turkey as well, and Ethiopia has to see that Ethiopia is not a threat. But when we look at the media narratives, we don't see this. So, as with regards to the process ongoing in Ankara, this is the most negative side of this process. This was a long introduction. I'm sorry about that. When we look at the Turkish media first, I'd like to start with that. Ethiopia's and Somalia's updates, it's not always the size constructed, the recruitments and the investments. These are all reflected in the media in Türkiye, and there are 1,000 security employees, for instance, that's been already employed in the country. There are big construction sites in the countries, and very important infrastructure companies, Turkish companies are there. So a lot of people, Turks, have economically important, the country is important for us. And for Ethiopia and Somalia dispute, Turkish media tries to reflect these, but in the international media, Reuters and BBC, they are quite leery about that, about the agreements. But the American media says that it will be impossible to achieve a resolution. So Xinhua, biggest press agency, media agency of China, it has 50 correspondents, cameramen, and they did not even make a single news about Ankara process. You cannot, for instance, Xinhua has a very great potential and is following up a lot of the world media, but did not make any news, did not feel the need to make any news about the Ankara process. There's only one analysis that's been made, and I think your commentary was on there, but other than that, there is nothing. And BBC is following, American newspapers are following, special news, also news are all made by these countries. These countries cannot say, if Turkey is in the picture, okay, there will be solution. About Tigray also, there's been a war, so two governments politically can make actually some moves, and everybody knowing the region can know that we should be cautious. Policy, foreign press policy, this is actually very interesting. It's a very important commercial route. So in the Indian media, a lot of news was made on this, and that was important again. And Eastern Africa media group, Nation Media, Daily Nation, and so all these newspapers, and Uganda newspapers also connected to that. And it is brought as if the process was negatively resolved. So their approach is that, of course, Ankara process did not reach a positive result, but also it diminished the tensions. Somalians live in Kenya, in Ethiopia. They are living in all the countries of the region, so it actually is bringing the subject as a problematic of all the Eastern Africa. And Somalia is also dispersed across the region. So that is actually a problematic and makes people cautious when approaching the matter, because emotionally, spiritually, they are a part of a community. And on BBC, they are talking about the biggest mediation initiative when talking about Ankara process, and Turkish approach to this shows that how Turkey is focusing on, is attentive to the matter. Turkish influence in Africa is actually reflected as Turkey sees a role in itself as part of its influence in Africa. When we look at the disinformation issues, the first one that started was after the agreements signed. Turkey made a statement, and a wrong translation of this was made and was published through a tweet, as Somalia was happy with the outcome of the process. Somaliland political elite wants political independence. What they do not know, the media, is that they love Turkey, because a diplomat told me this from Somaliland. why do you have relations with Mogadishu? Please, you should have a relationship with us, because we have brotherhood ties with us. Historically, you have to have a relationship with us. If there's a historical tie, it should be with us. So in Somaliland approach, they do not want Turkish interference. This is the perception in Somaliland. And Abiy Ahmed, with regards to the formatting of the agreement, there is this critique. This was an official declaration made that the party retrieved from the process. So there's been a question mark whether that declaration was made from somebody from the government. This false news was generated from someone inside. And Ethiopian, yes, about the arrival of Egyptian soldiers rather than Ethiopian soldiers. This was actually another disinformation. United Nations, Ethiopia soldiers were actually there, and of course Egypt can send their soldiers in the framework, but this was not the case, but it's been reflected as that happened, and this actually put some difficulties on the process. It means that I will make Egypt your neighbor. So 2.5 years ago, there was bombing going on, threat of bombings ongoing from Egypt's side. So your neighbor actually is doing that and saying that we will send 5,000 soldiers on your land. This was actually a huge threat. This is how I read it. Turkey's presence there is not a big threat, but Egypt's presence there is a huge threat. So after the agreement, so that was actually the Ethiopia. There is some Ethiopia army present there. The name will change at the end of the year. It will be. It's been stated that Ethiopian soldiers will be present, but we will not know. We don't know what will happen. But these tensions will be exacerbated. So while mediation is still ongoing, there is this fake news, disinformation ongoing, and it exacerbates the tensions. The Egyptian intelligence is trying, for instance, Ogaden's for the unification of Somalia. There are some armed branches, and for that I can say this is a very risky subject. The Somalia people living in Ethiopia, they don't see themselves as Ethiopians. When you ask them, where are you coming from, they say, I'm from Somalia. And they don't speak Ethiopian language. So if someone considers themselves as Somalia, it changes actually everything. Somalia states had previously wanted to have an independence, and first things he did was to clean that risk, and there has been a coup that happened, and the administration changed there. There's a different government there right now. So the armed risk is actually closed there. armed attempt is actually backfired. So if that can be exacerbated, and it's a huge risk, and there's an ongoing misinformation, disinformation about this. This is one of the risky issues. Another issue is, as Mr. Yunus mentioned, Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud and also others say if Ethiopia does not see our independence, accept our independence, we will retrieve. So this is also another disinformation, as if the process came to an end. If you can make a perception as such on the international media, the process can come to an end, because when you invite people, they won't come, and no response will come to official correspondences. So perception is important. Nobody will write that I am done. So this is the risk. The Turkish media and also other media of the responsible countries, parties should be sensitive on this, responsible on this, and we'll have to make news on why Turkey wants to be a facilitator, mediator, what will be the gain of Turkey and the region from this facilitating process, and all positive news should be turned into news 2 times. It will be repeatedly made news. So in order to have a resolution by the 3rd round, I think this could be an approach, a positive approach, and giving responses quickly also will disperse the clouds and the mist. So it is important to give quicker and efficient responses, and establishing a quicker relation with media, and to stay away from tensions is important as well. As you know, in Ethiopia and Tigray, there's been a quarrel, and Türkiye's support to Abiy Ahmed government was perceived as Tigray as it's a terrorist organization. And when you say terrorist organization, those are the ones that were actually running the country, governing the country. So when they were actually terrorists and terrorism leaders, terrorist organization leaders. So when we look at it from the Turkish side, Turkish perspective, in Turkish media, all the discourse actually changes. Sometimes, somehow, suddenly, someone becomes a terrorist, and so on. So this enemifying happening. So this is actually what's ongoing. There's a risk with regards to Ethiopia as well. We have commerce, we have ties. So there's a risk of vinifying Ethiopia, and we have to be attentive and exacerbating the tension when we are making news. And when I look at my other notes, I think I have covered all. If there are any questions, happy to respond. Thank you. You have attracted our attention to many important aspects. And with regards to also media approaches, when you first started your discourse, you have mentioned the Ottoman background, and you have used the Turkey of Ottoman era, and later on you have also discussed about disinformation and its ties with that. So I can say that we can complete this part now. If there are any questions and answers, we have 20 minutes approximately. For 20 minutes we can accept questions and answers, if there are any. First of all, thank you very much to all the participants. It was very fruitful panel. I would like to ask a general question. Anyone can respond. My question is, when we look at this peace process between Somalia and Ethiopia, for the other problems between the countries of the region, what can it have as an effect, as an influence? If so, what will be the consequences? In Africa, 17, 18 frozen conflicts are ongoing in Africa. This can actually have an effect, a negative effect on that. It have a risk to exacerbate those crises. But in the case of Somaliland's independence, can have an incentive for all the other federative structures, and also have a triggering effect on the other micro structures, and also can trigger the instability. This is what can I respond to this question. First of all, there is this reach, having access to the sea, and the second point was the division threat in the framework of a civil war. There is a potential civil war threat, and under these circumstances, Somalia and Ethiopia's disputes resolution, this actually is a factor. So that is the reason why maybe a proposal came to Türkiye for mediation. The economic and security ties in Turkey, of course, it makes a part of that. So would you like to say anything regarding this question? And you, please? Is it about Ethiopia? Yes, about the Ethiopian frozen conflicts. There are a lot of frozen conflicts. Abiy Ahmed, when he came in 2018, his main his target was to make a federal Ethiopia. To abolish that kind of a federative state, and to expand a system that will invite the political parties, so the minorities will also be represented. The previous government, TPA government, for 30 years, 20 years, said the Amharas and Oromos, if they come and if they govern the country, all the minorities like us will be threatened, and all our rights will be gone, and all our rights will be abolished. But Abiy Ahmed did just the contrary of that, and he said, no, who will be the majority will be in the center. But the Tigray war shows that Abiy Ahmed's ambition was not so easy to be achieved, and the tension with Somalia, if it is increased, if it's exacerbated, all the ethnical groups in Ethiopia will have an alliance with Mogadishu. So this independence army can have an alliance. So Ethiopia will have a very important civil war inside the country. But Ethiopia takes this into consideration, that Mogadishu's do not support any armed units. No, they have problems, defense point of view, economic point of view. So when they take into consideration this situation, they first try to see if they have an alliance. They can have an alliance with Eritrea, and then they switched to Somalia. because they think Somalia will not be able to, does not have a power to trigger these threats. This dispute, if we cannot come to a conclusion, a resolution, I do agree with you, Ethiopia will be the country that will be the most affected by this, because Ethiopia is the most confused country in the region. And in the constitution of Ethiopia, there is a clause which says every region can go out of the federal system. It can. This is actually what I wanted to say. That morning, before the army came in, the assembly actually got together for the federation and wanted to announce independence. It just is similar to Western African countries. That's what they actually experience. And now Ethiopia, there is a civil war. After Tigray, there is Amhara. There's an important problem going on against the government there. And right now, Addis Ababa cannot use the railroad, the highway, because there is army troops there controlling the area. As you said, there is Ogaden region, the biggest region of the country. Those Somalia people, they don't want to be seen as Ethiopians. If there's a referendum there, 85% of those people will say they would like to be linked to Somalia. So Abiy Ahmed received Nobel Prize because there's an agreement between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Eritrea and Ethiopia has disputes regarding these issues still ongoing. Now, both Ethiopia and Eritrea wants to access sea, and at the same time, Eritrea does not want an agreement with Tigray. And now, Ethiopia, Somalia process. Now, Eritrea was a huge problem. And Somalia wanted cooperation. Ethiopia wanted a cooperation with Eritrea, as we saw in Djibouti as well. So Ethiopia will be affected the most. For the North African countries, there is also instability going on, but Ethiopia will be the country that will be the most affected. I hope that Turkey's role, maybe I will respond to that when questions come. There are many different problems between different states, and Turkey has good relations with Ethiopia and Somalia, and have built trust between both of the countries, and international community should support that. And as our colleague said, there is something needed coming from the media side as well. These negotiations, these talks should be reflected against the disinformation in the media. I think we can do these things, we can make these steps. As Mr. Abdinur mentioned, the process is ongoing behind a little bit closed doors. Regionally, when I look at the African Horn and compare it to other regions of conflict in the world, there's a separation into cells that is ongoing in the African side. There is the post-political party situation and trying to put them together under the one umbrella. Abiy Ahmed, when he was the youngest leader in the region back then when he came to the government, and he changed the route. He was able to change actually the route, but Ethiopia is a state. But actually, it is not so healthy from my point of view to say that one side is more healthier than the other one. The two sides have problems. If Turkey's advantage in the sense is that Turkey has the possibility to look at it from outside and can say that it has a flaked point of view, and the economic relations with Ethiopia and strategic and humanitarian relations with Somalia. When we look at it from this perspective, Turkey can have and has a much more neutral approach to both countries. I would like to, in the First World War, first embassy personnel sent by the Ottomans, Ahmet Masar Bey. He was first appointed to Harar, ambassador of Harar, and then he came to Addis Ababa. Niciosu actually came to power at the time. He was 16 years old. He is ruling the country. Ahmet Masar Bey has a relationship with him in 1916, convinced him to fight together with the Ottoman. An Ethiopian prince was convinced to fight with the Ottomans, together with the Ottomans. So there are some correspondences, and Ottoman was also mediating at the time for the entrance of arms, because Somalia was fighting against the England, Muhammad Abdullah, to help Muhammad Abdullah, and those arms were sent to Djibouti and then to Somalia. And who did this was a consulate, a personnel of the Ottoman. And so when the relationship became more positive, at the end, Prince requested him, this is present in the correspondences, give some land from the Red Sea to us, give us a port line to us. And Ottoman does not have a hegemony de facto at that time over there, but it says, yes, I will, but in the First World War, in exchange, you will be fighting together with us. And this is actually written to Istanbul, saying that the conditions of the agreement is accepted and they will be fighting with us and we will be giving them some land. And all the arms were sent through Ethiopia, and Germany, Ottomans, all involved. And this is 200 years ago, this was brought to light, and today we are still brought into light with this process. So this ports issue, if it's resolved, I think it's important. Then this prince, he accepts the proposal. France and England at the time. The first photo montages actually were used, and he was actually his rule was collapsed. there was a coup that's made. So again, the situation all started with this port situation. I would like to say there's one more thing for this process to come to a solution, but it is very difficult to resolve this port matter. It's a land country. It has to reach the port in a secure way. There are 5 countries, Kenya, Somalia, Eritrea, and Sudan, have access to ports, but they don't have trust in Ethiopia. We can look in the literature. They see Ethiopia as an invading country because it actually acquired land from all the countries. When you look at it, there has been quite a lot of wars. Ethiopia is called the Habeshistan, formed of, they are not highlanders. There is a lot of Muslims and Islamic people adopted Islam in that region. These 5 countries want to have access commercially, but for their national defense, territorial defense, they don't want to trust Ethiopia. Ethiopia has to respect Somalia's sovereignty. Türkiye, how it can help for the efficient ongoing of the process can actually, for instance, African Union countries can also take part in this process because these are African communities, African countries. There should be an entente. These African countries should be involved in the process because this process is realized by Turkey, by Türkiye, but large countries of Africa like Nigeria, South Africa, and so on. These countries are not so sensitive towards Ethiopia, Somalia, and they can be actually included in the process, and the process can become more efficient. Of course, when we're talking about the Ankara process, we should underline that Turkey is having a facilitator role in this sense. There is a facilitating role of Turkey trying to establish a dialogue between the parties. So this is the first stage in the literature concerning the conflict resolution. As Mr. Yunus also mentioned, shuttle diplomacy is ongoing. After this phase is passed, it will be very valuable. Are there any other questions? There are 2 questions. Herkese merhaba. Şimdi İngilizce konuşacağım.
How does Turkey plan to sustain or evolve its role in the mediation process moving forward? Is there a long-term strategy or plan or for continued engagement?
Biz de. We don't know either.
Sen mi alırsın? Ben daha fazla çünkü bilmedim. O zaman.
I can respond in English as well. So actually, we don't know either the process. We will get the information from the news. So far, what we know actually we explain here. So we don't know more about the content, the process. As we discussed that this process must include these kind of academic journals and others to get more detail about the process. So far, we know this kind of information.
Could you use microphone?
What lessons can be learned from Turkey's involvement in this mediation process?
Like essay questions. Okay.
No, because Turkey is both an ally to Ethiopia and Somalia. As we know, Ethiopia is a landlocked nation which doesn't have an access to any port or sea, and Somalia has the largest coastline in East Africa. And of course, recent developments as a journalist, there are security threats in Ethiopia involving in Somalia. That's Al-Shabaab, since their borders are next to each other. And there's also a security involvement in Turkey, in Somalia. In the last 14 years, Turkey has been training Somalia's security forces and has been a great ally to Somalia. Is there any efforts that will be evolving from this mediation, since Turkey is both an ally to the Horn of Africa nations?
I can respond to one. Actually, Turkey is trying to test its power in the region by this way. So, the Turkey is trying to envisage what the Turkey's power on Ethiopia and Somalia. So, this process actually will test the power of Turkey and how Turkey's mediation effort or Turkey's offer are being accepted by the two actors. So by this reason, Turkey is test its visibility and it's test its African policy in the region. So we will see if this process will come along the positive result, then Turkey can proclaim that its visibility, its power on both actors are more than welcome, or more than we anticipate. So this is the one result. Also, this is the first lesson that Turkey can accept. The second one, actually, there is multiple actors, including the UAE, Egypt, and others. So, for example, next week, the president of Egypt, Sisi, will visit Turkey, will pay an official visit Turkey after a decade. So, actually, I combine the process, Ethiopia-Somaliland process, will actually has triggered the visit as well. So, so this process will also influence Turkey-Egypt relations and Turkey-UAE relation as well. This is another consequence of the process. Some of the analysis actually claims that Turkey-Somalia agreement that we signed in February, the pact, economic and security pact, most of the analysts claims that Turkey has signed this agreement after the Somaliland-Ethiopia agreement because Somalia has felt insecure. That's why they urged themselves to engage a cooperation with Turkey. But I don't claim that assertion, and I seen the process, Turkey-Ethiopia-Somalia agreement was actually expected process of Turkey-Somalia engagement.
Excuse me, sir. Can I respond to that? Because you mentioned the president of Egypt will be in Ankara next week, and then there's recent development that says Ethiopia's troops will be withdrawn from Somalia and replaced with that of Egypt. And then there is the process of Turkey mediating both nations. Now, the question is, will there be any repercussions or any difficulties in solving both nations, as Egypt will be a third party to this?
Vallahi ben de anlamadım çocuğun sesini. Mısır bir parçası olacak mı dedi.
This mediation process, you mean? I didn't get your point because I couldn't hear you.
Mısır nasıl etkiler diyor işte.
Well, I don't think so, because Egypt feels more need more assistance from Turkey to balance the power of Ethiopia after this the Hadassi dam was constructed. So we haven't mentioned that, but the Hadassi or the Gerd dam is the biggest project that the Ethiopia has implemented in the history of its empire period. So actually, the Egypt, for my own analysis, see Turkey as a balancing power against the Ethiopians' hegemonic aspiration in the region. So that's more affirmative. That's why they pay a visit. They will pay a visit. So it's more, affirmative process rather than seeing Turkey as an obstacle.
I just want to add one comment. I think lessons could be learned from Turkey's facilitation role between Somalia and Ethiopia. We have already raised the issue, which is more bigger and grave if the current process collapse. The Horn of Africa is already one of the most fragile and stable regions, not only in Africa, but in the world. So if Turkey succeeds in this, it's be a win for the region, a win for Ethiopia, and a win for Somalia and the regional stability and security. Turkey has already mediated between Somalia and Somaliland for the past decade and so. Although there has not been concrete official breakthrough, there has been some important advancements between Hargeisa and Mogadishu, and there has been agreements over certain areas like security, like the control of the aviation, and so many things. So Turkey has already done some mediation in the region, and this is one more up level on a country level, and a lot of international community, the Africans in the region, are looking up to solve this process. We have seen the statement from the African Union after the January MOU that they need Somalia and Ethiopia to find a common ground to solve the issues, and also from major African countries. We have seen Kenya try to mediate between Somalia and Ethiopia, although that was not successful. So now I think with Turkish history of mediations, and it is good relations with both parts, if these could be sustained, it would be a good lesson.
Var mı başka soru? Son bir soru alalım, sonra kapatalım. Buyurun.
Gelmiyor.
Geldi.
Önümüzdeki dönemde Türkiye'nin Somali ile Etiyopya
With regards to Turkish intervention between Somalia and Ethiopia, what can be the further steps of the intervention, which means the next steps of this facilitation process? What will be these steps? The Ankara process, if it comes to a positive outcome or not, the military and economic ties are very deeply rooted. So I don't think that Ankara process will come to an end, and because talks and negotiations will never end, because there has been talks in the past that lasted for 8 years and so on. They are not, the African people, Somalia and Ethiopian people are not close to having talks. They don't close the door to talking. So they are actually inclined to talking, but coming to an end, definitive end, that can take time. There are peace or mediation activities. When you look at it in the world, it takes 10, 20 years. But Turkey, with this mediation facilitator role, Turkey positions itself to at a higher level in the world system. So when we look at an analysis of the process, Turkey is a humanitarian actor in Africa, is accepted as such in Africa, and as a natural result of that, it has a humanitarian actor profile, And this is an humanitarian diplomacy and foreign policy based on humanitarian diplomacy that Turkey has. And the first phase of this diplomacy is support and aid to crisis, emergency crisis. And the second is to reinforce the capacity and contributing seriously to the regional development. And third phase is to provide sustainable peace in the region and to provide a mediation role in that sense. So there is this reality in Turkey. Turkey does not have a magic stick that it can just touch the process and change it all. And the process cannot happen overnight. The other actors, United States, can be United Arab Emirates, and other countries should contribute, should support Turkey, because the non-success of this process should be taken into consideration. But the communities cannot suddenly visualize a negative what happens when these crises are not resolved, because those crises can be very bloody in African region. There is this sea security, which is also an issue. We know the war that's happened in Sudan. That is not also a coincidence when we look at the actors in that war, what parties did what agreements with other countries in Africa. These are not coincidences. In Gulf region, for instance, it's been discussed that the Gulf will be turned into an inner sea. There's the Egyptians going in and so on. So thinking about turning Red Sea into an inner sea from Egyptian perspective. So different countries have different ambitions. So Turkey's intervention is not, of course, sufficient in that sense. Different countries have different agendas. And this mediation, Ankara process, mediation facility is important in that sense. If there is no other questions, let us close this panel. Okay, so there are no questions. We would like to thank you a lot for your participation, to the guests inside the conference hall, and also for the ones watching us online. Thank you for consecrating your time to us. And with regards to similar topics, let us hope to get together again on similar